All right, so in this video, I'm just going to introduce you to the idea of the shadow and what I mean by that term. And also, I'm also going to introduce you to atonement as well. And then over the course of the next couple of videos, we're really going to flesh out this idea of the shadow. But I'm going to start this video with a quote by Connie Zweig on meeting the shadow, where Connie writes that the shadow goes by many familiar names: the disowned self, the lower self, the dark twin or brother in Bible and myth, the double, the repressed self, the alter ego, the id. When we come face to face with our darker side, we use metaphor to describe these shadow figures: meeting our demons, wrestling with the devil, descent to the underworld, dark night of the soul, midlife crisis. And the reason why I want to start with that quote is because when you're studying this idea of the shadow, you're going to hear lots of different people talk about lots of different things, and they're going to use lots of different metaphors for pretty much the same thing, this idea of the shadow. And myself included, when I say these things, I'm talking about the same thing, the shadow itself. But we use all these different metaphors and representations for the same thing because we're trying to understand something that has a shadow to it. It's a naturally elusive figure. You can't really get a hold upon it. And sometimes when certain terms, certain statements work, you kind of just work with that and build off of that. And that's where you get these ideas of like Horus descending into the underworld to save his father Osiris, or even Pinocchio descending into the underworld, or descending into the belly of the beast to save his father as well. And also how you get this idea of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, or the Incredible Hulk, or the two brothers, Cain and Abel from the Bible. There's a reason there's a reason behind these stories and why these stories are so effective, why they're so meaningful for us. And we just have to understand or remind ourselves that what we're talking about here is our shadow selves, this other identity there within us, that it certainly exists and certainly is something that we have to negotiate with. And so that's the first point that I wanted to point out before really getting into this video. The second thing is to just remind people again that if you still have this idea of enlightenment as being a fun thing, then you got another thing coming to you, because there's not a lot of feel-goodery and feel-good feelings and feelings of happiness along this journey. A lot of this has to do with struggle and strife, and unfortunately most people aren't going to feel comfortable down this to head down this path or head down this journey into enlightenment, because a lot of people don't want to go here, and it takes a lot of courage to go into the shadow, to try to understand our shadow selves. And so just to understand what I'm talking about here, the shadow represents the dark side of a person's personality. The shadow is the embodiment of the monster within all of us, the evil within all of us, the acknowledgement of the capacity for evil within ourselves. When we hear stories about people doing terrible things in their lives, we can acknowledge that that if we truthfully study this for ourselves, we can acknowledge that under the right circumstances, the particular circumstances of the same individual, we could find ourselves committing the same horrible acts as them as well, and that we can't be afraid to acknowledge these things if we're so to be honest and truthful about our thoughts and our feelings. And I understand that just saying that is not a fun thing to say, but it is a truthful thing to say. And so the shadow is everything that you do not identify as yourself. The shadow is the thing that you spend most of your life trying to justify away, of experiences that you have, trying to justify them, that they didn't happen the way that they happened, or that that you don't agree with how it actually occurred. And we can actually experience the shadow most quickly, if we're new to this, through projection. And so projection is, we see it like this. Everything that you hate, everything that you dislike in your friends, in your families, in movie characters, in supervillains or whatever, that's your shadow. Everything that you don't like in everybody else, that's you projecting your shadow upon them. And you not realizing that under those particular circumstances, you would exude the exact or similar traits as what you're experiencing from somebody else. And sometimes you do express those same things. So when you look at somebody else and you see things that you don't like in that other person, that's your shadow. Okay? And so we want, in this practice, what we want to do is purposely experience our shadows so that we can come to terms with the side of ourselves that our ego doesn't want us to know actually exists. And so, our persona doesn't want to know exists. So we have these two sides to ourselves, the persona and the shadow. And the persona is your normal self, okay? This is the self that you perceive yourself as. This is the one that is always striving to do better and improving and being good and great and all of that stuff. And then there's this other side to you that you're not as aware of, that is dangerous and has other tendencies and intentions that you're not fully aware of because you don't want to be fully aware of them, because the intentions make you uncomfortable. And so, this is from the Portable Jung. The shadow is a moral problem that challenges that challenges the whole ego personality, for no one can become conscious of the shadow without considerable moral effort. To become conscious of it involves recognizing the dark aspects of the personality as present and real. This act is the essential condition for any kind of self-knowledge, and it therefore, as a rule, meets with considerable resistance. Indeed, self-knowledge as a psychotherapeutic measure frequently requires much painstaking work, extending over a long period of time. So, we moved on from just talking about the shadow to this idea of morality. And the reason why I've been banging out all those morality videos, because it was to prepare ourselves for the moral effort that's required for us to meet our shadow and to take it on without it, basically eluding us, or worse, obliterating us. Because, as I mentioned in an earlier video, as you come to the objective knowledge of the objective difference between right action and wrong action, right behavior and wrong behavior, which is morality, you will eventually have the quite jarring and sudden realization that you've committed a lot of wrong actions in your life, and perhaps you even enjoyed committing some of the wrong actions in your life, and that you're even capable of committing even more wrong actions in the future. Just because you know the difference between right and wrong behavior doesn't mean that you're going to immediately change your behavior. And so, the first thing that occurred to me when I had this realization was that I was going to resist this realization, resist the idea that, it wasn't really a resistance. It was taking solace in the fact that, well, I committed some wrong things in my past that I feel terrible about now, but, I didn't know that they were wrong when I committed them. And unfortunately, that doesn't make them okay. There's still things that you need to do in order to atone for those past wrongs that you've committed in your past. So we have to remind ourselves that a wrong is a wrong, even when you didn't know any better, because it's the individual's responsibility to know what the wrongs are. And there were times in your adult life that you didn't know the objective difference between right and wrong behavior. And so you made some terribly bad mistakes in your past. We have to come to acknowledge these mistakes, because now we know right from wrong. We know now what we did wrong. We know what we have to do correct in the future to right those wrongs, okay? And now that we know the difference between right and wrong, the fact that there's 6 things: lying, murder, rape, coercion, theft, things like that, stealing, that are just fundamentally wrong that we've done in the past and that we're even capable of, under particular circumstances, to continue to do in the future. And so, Erich Neumann says that man has to realize that he possesses a shadow, which is the dark side of his own personality. He is being compelled to recognize his inferior function, if only for the reason that he is so often overwhelmed by it, with the result that the light world of his conscious mind and his ethical values succumb to an invasion by the dark side. The whole suffering brought upon man by his experience of the inherent evil in his own nature. The whole immeasurable problem of original sin, in fact, threatens to annihilate the individual in a welter of anxiety and feelings of guilt. So, naturally, coming to to know your shadow comes with a whole lot of emotional pain, and suffering. Transitioning from not taking responsibility for your actions to an individual who does take responsibility for his actions is a tough transition to endure, not just because from that point on, you're taking responsibility for your behavior, for your right and wrong actions, but also retroactively for past wrong actions that you have committed in the past. And these are going to make us feel an extreme amount of regret, pain and suffering, and guilt and shame for. This is kind of an idea of original sin, realizing that you and you alone committed all of the wrongs in your life and that you are responsible for all of those wrongs. And that it's, the biggest thing is that it's okay? That it's okay to feel bad when you make mistakes. It's okay to feel bad from time to time. It's okay to study these feelings of guilt and shame and anxiety. And that this is really never about hiding ourselves away from experiencing the gift of feeling feelings, just because the feelings sometimes feel bad, okay? Unfortunately, there are things that we can do to right the wrongs in our lives, to start healing ourselves from these pains and injustices. But, we do have this natural inclination to try to eradicate the evil within, to try to get rid of this shadow of the unknown, okay? But we have to acknowledge that that's not possible, destroying or ripping out a piece of who you are, as Alexander Solzhenitsyn wrote. The line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being, and who is willing to destroy a piece of his own heart? You can't rip out a piece of who you are, your identity, your individuality, and then just expect to be more enlightened because you've proven to the world that you don't have this thing. You will always have this thing, and it's there for a reason, and you need it. You need to acknowledge it, and we need to start the process of integrating it. We need to become whole again. And so what we have to do is accept our darkness, accept the darker side, acceptance of the darkness, because that's all there is for us to do. So Carl Jung said that there is no generally effective technique for assimilating the shadow. It is more like diplomacy or statesmanship, and it is always an individual matter. First, one has to accept and take seriously the existence of the shadow. Second, one has to become aware of its qualities and intentions. This happens through conscientious attention to moods, fantasies, and impulses. And third, a long process of negotiation is unavoidable. All we can do, really, is accept ourselves for who we are and acknowledge that our shadow exists and that it's a part of us. And in order to do that, we have to do what Jung said. We have to first acknowledge that the shadow exists. And second, we have to become aware of what it looks like and what it wants. Okay? And we do this by paying honest attention to our moods, our impulses, our fantasies, things that we like and don't exactly know why, these urges that we get from time to time, and study them and look at them and write out what's going on there. It's all about coming to know who you are more effectively. And so for the rest of this video, I just want to talk about atonement, which is an exercise that we can practice that gets you in touch with your shadow a little bit, and it helps you become more successful in your life because it starts focusing your attention on these wrong actions, these wrong past actions in your lives, and how you can correct them. And so atonement means at one mind. Some say, you want peace of mind, and I say, you can't have peace of mind if your mind is in pieces. So I don't like peace of mind. I don't like peace, okay? Peace always sounds like pieces. I want whole. I want one mind, okay? You need one mind. You cannot reject who you are with the wrongs that you've committed. in the past and all of the wrongs that you're capable of committing in the future, because a mind cannot unify if it's rejecting a massive piece of itself. So you have to make amends. Amen. Amendments. Okay? You have to mend the mind. You have to put it back together again, make it whole again, integrate it. And we do this by, well, one way to do this is by acknowledging our mistakes, acknowledging our past wrongs throughout the day. What did I do wrong today? Figure out what the right thing to do was in those particular situations, and then absolve to do better next time by writing out what the right thing to do was in that particular situation. And then right the wrong next time you have an opportunity to experience that that particular situation. And so it's as simple as just acknowledging that you know that you did something wrong. And since you cannot fix what has already occurred, something that is already in the past, you can't change the past, then just determine to do better in the future, to do better next time. Okay? This is really what an apology is. This is also what the idea of repentance is in Christianity, in the Roman Catholic Church. And so you can do this by writing out your mistake and then making amends, and then declare that because you now know what the wrong thing is and have realized what the right thing to do is, and that you'll make sure to do what is right the next time. Okay? Once you acknowledge what the right thing to, once the knowledge of the right thing to do is gained, then there's no real reason to dwell on the past. Okay? There's no need to allow the guilt and shame to consume your life forever. Just let it go. Okay? But with that being said, there may be some times when you could actually correct a past injustice that you committed. Okay? In those particular situations where you find yourself where you'll think of something that if you were actually truly capable of doing it, like maybe you committed a wrong towards a friend or something, and you committed an injustice to them, and you feel bad about that, so you're letting your emotions guide you to what you committed wrong, and they said, oh, you did something wrong to a past friend a couple of years ago, how could you correct that? Well, simply just by writing out an apology letter on Facebook and then sending them a DM apologizing about what happened, what the situation was, and why you're sorry, and how you'll be able to do better next time. Okay? These sort of things make you feel better, and that's why we do them. They make us feel better. They absolve us from the guilt and shame that we experience from committing the wrong action. And over time, these will make us into more successful individuals because we are locating wrongs that we've committed, righting those wrongs, and making sure that we're doing the right thing in the future. Okay? And so, this is how we get over our past failures, humiliations, and embarrassments. You have to take responsibility for them. You have to gain knowledge of the wrong that you committed and either correct those things in the present moment or absolve to do better next time when the situation presents itself again in your life. Again, this is all about coming to know who we are as individuals and what the right and wrong things to do are in the universe. Okay? Remember, this is all about, life is a lot about trying to figure out what the right thing to do is in a particular situation. And if you're not paying attention to this on a day-to-day basis, what are the things that I did wrong today? What are the things that I did right today? Write them out daily, every single night before you go to bed. Then you're just kind of meandering through life, But once you have a long list of the right things to do in particular situations and the wrong things to do in particular situations and what the right things to do are in those particular situations, you start realizing that there's not that many particular situations in life itself, and you already have all of the right answers to them. And that's going to propel you forward much faster. And all that you're propelling yourself forward to is to more wrong actions that you can find out what the right, correct action is in those situations. Okay? And so, this is the start of something that's called shadow work. Okay? There's really little reason to dwell on the shadow itself because it is a shape-shifting archetype. It'll be different from individual to individual, and it's hard to really paint down into a corner. Okay, this is an individual process that you have to do at the individual level. It'll be different from individual to individual. Okay, so that's not where our focus is going to particularly be. All right. But where my focus will be is in the work that has to be done in order to expose this shadow for ourselves, okay? So that we can actually be presented with the shadow. And so finally, before we go, I just want to remind you, do not fear the shadow. Remember that fear will only shut you down. It'll only make you ignore the very thing that we actually need to pay attention to. And so I highly suggest expressing the shadow when you think about it, when you think about things that you project onto other individuals, what you don't like about other individuals and why. And to try to see what your shadow looks like, and then try to accept your shadow for what it is and integrate it into your being. And like I said, in the next couple of videos, we're going to be talking about the shadow at an even more deeper level. So I'll see you in the next video.